Hello again, you gorgeous lot. This weekend is a very special one here in Southampton because it is Southampton Pride. And no, I don't mean the celebration of all those of us who are proud to live in Southampton because, I, of course, am referring to the Pride celebrations of the LGBTQIA+ community, of which I am a proud but somewhat covert member. Some people believe that if you are bisexual and with somebody of the opposite sex to you, then you're somehow not bisexual anymore and you're not really welcome in the whole LGBTQ+ space, but I think that that's a load of bollocks. I'm going to celebrate Pride the way I want to celebrate Pride, which is not going out because I'm a hermit. I'm going to spend this Pride weekend sewing, and what I am going to sew is a scrunchie. Now, I have actually been delving a lot into the history of scrunchies, such that it is, although anyone born in the 80s or before is probably not going to be too pleased with the idea that I'm describing their childhood as history. But we're going to go into the history later because I don't want to be like one of those recipes that give you like their entire life story before actually giving you the recipe. Although I feel like I'm kind of getting there at this stage, so let's shut up and just get on and make the thing. I don't actually have any purple fabric, weirdly, but I do have these lovely lads here who are kind of purple, so I'm gonna take it. So once you've sewn this short edge together, and we're going to ignore the fact that the short edge has a hole in because that will be relevant later. For now, we're just going to assume that's completely sewn up and we have this nice tube here. What we want to do eventually is make this so that it's a tube this way as well, so that it's got a hole through here and then also a hole through here. The mathematically minded of you may know that that is a torus. We are aiming for a torus. But obviously this has got to be sewn inside out and then turned the right way round. So what you could do if you want an easier way of doing things is simply fold this in half, right sides together, sew along this edge and just keep going around and feeding that through until you eventually get back to where you started. And then through that little hole that we made, you can turn the whole thing inside out and then use the safety pin trick to thread a long piece of elastic through. But as you saw, we're doing it one like this because I really don't like threading elastic through. It always goes wrong for me and I always end up losing the end of the elastic. So I'm going to do it in a different way, but it's kind of fiddly. What we are going to do instead is go back to this point where we just sewn the short side together with that hole in. We're going to open that out. I'm going to find the halfway point. So here the halfway point is the yellow and green seam against the red and purple seam. So what we're going to do is fold these bits out of the way and then in order to sew these two edges, fold that together, making sure that when we sew, we're not sewing down this bit on the inside. That is just tucked away as far as it can be into that fold, so that this is purely those two edges that we want to meet together. And then as we sew down here, as we run out of fabric, we're just going to pull on this little sort of like rope that we've made in the middle, and that will pull the fabric through, and that will give us more fabric to sew down the edge of. And if we keep doing this, we will end up getting to the place that we started, which sounds lovely. But then when you get to the end, you also have to thread a long piece of elastic through and then tie it off, which is what we're trying to avoid. So here's the fiddly bit. We're starting in the same place. We're folding this away so it's not gonna get in the way. We're folding that over, but then before we start stitching here, we're going to take our elastic and put it around this bit, which is why it gets really, really fiddly, especially to film on camera. So what this will do is, as we go around, this will make sure that the elastic is already in the scrunchie, so the only thing we have to do is turn it inside out and then stitch up the opening. So now, as we're going around, not only do we have to pull on this rope in the middle to give us more bottom fabric, we also have to pull the fabric through the elastic to give us more top fabric. So essentially, it's fairly easy to figure out what you need to do, because if you're running out of fabric on the top, you pull through this elastic. You can see this is already getting really complicated to explain. And if you're running out of fabric on the bottom, so you get to around here, you pull on this. So I am going to film that on the machine, and hopefully it will kind of make sense. So now that we're a little way in, you can kind of see what's happening better. You can see that this is essentially forming an inside-out scrunchie because of how the elastic is working. And then as we pull down on this middle one, that essentially just turns the end of this like more inside out and pulls it through there. And then as we pull that through, that is how we're attaching that over the top. And so the more we go over there, the more it sews itself around the elastic, and then by the end we'll just have one completed scrunchie around there that we just need to turn inside out. Does that work? I don't know. I guess we'll see. Ta-da! Isn't it beautiful? I am so pleased with it, and I haven't owned a scrunchie in years, like since I was a child, probably. I promised you we were going to talk about the history of scrunchies, and indeed we are. Now, Quick disclaimer before we talk about this. Funnily enough, there hasn't been all that much academic research into the origins of the humble scrunchie, so I don't exactly have the most watertight sources here. I mainly had to work from online newspaper and magazine articles. I have included all of the articles that I used down in the description, so please feel free to peruse and critique their reliability to your heart's content. The scrunchie was a style icon in the 1980s and the 1990s, but in fact, most sources indicate that it was invented in the 1960s by a man called Philip E. Myers. Myers? I'm gonna go Myers. I can't find out how these sources know that this particular man invented this particular thing in 1963, but apparently they do. However, it wasn't until 1987 that singer-songwriter Romy Revson decided to patent the design. The story goes that Romy was house-sitting and was trying to come up with a way to put her hair up without damaging it like the elastic bands of the time did. Inspired by the stretchy band of her pajama bottoms, Romy decided to encase a piece of elastic in some soft fabric and named the item the Scrunchie, after her dog. Yes, you did hear me right, that is Scrunchie. The R came later. Romy patented the design in 1987 and later on sold the product to brand Scrunchie due to their name. The name evolved into Scrunchie just due to the fact that the fabric was scrunched up and it just felt nicer to say. The Scrunchie exploded in popularity over the next few years. In fact, in the 1988 film Heathers, the Scrunchie kind of plays a pivotal role in denoting who has the power in the social hierarchy of Westerberg High. The Scrunchie's success continued into the 1990s. I specifically remember being at school and having a uniform Scrunchie where they made a little white and coloured gingham Scrunchie for each of the different school uniforms in the area. Mine was green and white. Sadly, all good things must come to an end, and the popularity of the Scrunchie sort of declined towards the end of the 1990s and the beginning of the 2000s. This is particularly noted in a 2003 episode of Sex and the City, where Sarah Jessica Parker's character Carrie Bradshaw mentions that
no woman who works at W magazine and lives on Perry Street would be caught dead in a hip downtown restaurant wearing a scrunchie.
Now, even though she was a fictional character, Carrie Bradshaw had a lot of sway in the fashion choices of the early noughties. If the Scrunchie was going downhill before it was mentioned on Sex and the City, it was as good as dead after that. Or so we thought. Fast forward 14 years later to the 2017 New York Fashion Week, specifically the designs of Monsieur Gabriel. Fashion journalists at the time were shocked and amazed to see the return of the Scrunchie, not in its pineapple-haired form of the 80s and 90s, but in a more casual, sleek style, loosely holding back a low ponytail. Now, 2017 had something crucial to the evolution of fashion that the 80s and 90s didn't: Instagram. Once scrunchies started showing up on the catwalk, they started showing up on celebrities' feeds. And then we had the dawn of the Visco Girl. If you are unaware, the Visco Girl is something that was born out of the Visco photo editing app. The Visco Girl is a stereotype that is defined by what a thin white girl may adorn herself with, i.e. large oversized tie-dyed t-shirt that's so big it covers her denim shorts, quote-unquote ugly fashionable shoes like Birkenstocks or Crocs, expensive brands such as Fjällräven backpacks, Pura Vida bracelets, and Hydro Flask water bottles. Finally, if their wavy beach hair is not tied up with one, you will definitely see at least 3 on their wrist. The humble scrunchie. The thing about Gen Z is that they weren't born long enough ago to recognise the scrunchie as something sort of nostalgically kitsch. They have the youth and freedom to view it as something that is retro. And once it's retro, it's fashionable for good, right? Personally, I just think they are a fun way to further accessorise and add a little bit of colour to your outfit or your sewing room, which apparently has no colour from this angle. I hope you enjoyed this little dive into the origin of the scrunchie. If you did, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more sewing, historical, vintagey, fashiony thingamabobs. What's the thing I normally say? More chats, more crafts, all that good stuff. Bye!